Okay, good morning, everybody. The date is August 24th. The time is 9:09. Hereby called to order the CRA workshop of the City of Groveland. Jenny, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Chair Keith Kehoe.
Here.
Vice Chair Barbara Gaines.
Here.
Board Member Stephen Chilkowski.
Here.
Board Member Michael J. Cox, absent. Board Member Amy Jo Carroll.
Here.
Board Member Dan Corsi.
Here.
Ex officio Commissioner Anthony Sabatini, absent. Interim City Manager Tim Maslow.
Here.
CRA Manager Frank Castellani. Here. CRA Consultant Laura Smith.
No, she's not attending. She's not here.
Sergeant at Arms Lieutenant Boodhoo. Here. City Clerk Jenny Wright here.
Thank you very much. Tim, before we get started on the agenda, could you bring us up to date? We have a vacancy, just so everybody knows that we have a vacancy.
Yes, we do have a vacancy. That position is going to be posted through the city's clerk's office. This is an appointment that the council ultimately will make. Jenny, do you have the details in terms of the term that is being left? The term limit, the expiration?
I'd have to go back and look at
Right.
Yeah, we'll go back and look. We've already posted the vacancy.
Okay, do we have the expiration date or the completion date for the applications?
Yes, I don't know it off the top of my head. I can find out for you. Travis handled that.
We'll get that detail during the meeting, so you have a completion date, but we're receiving applications currently.
Very good. Thank you so much. Now we'll go on to the agenda, GAI overview presentations of the downtown Groveland realignment, Ready Master Plan. Do I turn that over to you, Frank?
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody. Are we waiting on the presentation to upload, or are we good to go?
I
Might need a
think
minute.
we are, but we can get started. I actually printed the presentation for you guys, so you have it in front of you, and whenever it's ready, IT is going to kind of put it on the screen and then probably catch up on the slides. Is that okay to you, or we can kind of wait probably 5 more minutes? We can get started. Fine either way. Frank, Tim?
Well, I think, can we address the number 2 on the agenda real quickly? Just, do you want me to address that, or
I can go to number 2 and come back to number
Okay,
1 if
sounds
you like.
good.
I'd just like to inform the board that we will not be going on the walkthrough. We were advised by council that it would be put us in a situation where the perception could be that we were violating the sunshine law. We know that it wouldn't be reality, but having us all walking around and one person or 2 people trying to take minutes would maybe put us in jeopardy of sidetracking what we're trying to do. So sometimes it's just better to leave it alone. So we've decided to cancel that tour and then try to go through it, frankly, just through it from here. I'm sure that if any one of us want a tour at any point in time, we can get a hold of Frank, and he will have somebody take us around and show us, just as long as we're not all together.
That sounds good. And again, we certainly can work with any board member to talk about the individual aspects that we were going to discuss on the tour. So, the sites, et cetera. Just since we have a little bit of time while the presentation loads, I wanted to mention as well, the CRA board vacancy also leads to a task force board vacancy. So once we seat somebody for the CRA board, we can then backfill Matthew, because remember, he was on both. So we'll have another vacancy for that person to think about the appointment for the CRA task force. All right, so I think that was it for sort of announcements and housekeeping, and we'll see where we are. Ready?
I think we can get started. And since until Friday at 5 p.m., the walk was still on the agenda, the presentation is going to have that. Also, We'll do our best to give you, there's some aerial photos that we have, and it has the route on it, and then you know your streets. We also have some kind of existing conditions over here as a small model, so we'll try to kind of illustrate the best that we can to take your input on some of the streets. So what we're gonna do is the initial agenda was me giving a presentation for almost like an hour, 45 minutes as an introduction. Then we were gonna go to the walk, and then we're gonna come back and do a debrief. So what we're gonna do is the presentation and the debrief. So I guess we have the most updated one on the screen now. You also have a printed version there. So my name is Claudia Ray. I'm an urban designer and senior planner for GI Consultants, and I'm the PM for this project. I have here with me Blake Drury, which is going to be the project director and planner and master planner. I have Donald Wishart, which is the landscape architect for the project. We don't have our engineer team here, which is Amy Shields, David, and Natalia. Natalia is actually, she was here last time. She's a Groveland resident. She should want to be here today, but she's on maternity leave. She just had a baby, it's a second baby, 2 weeks ago. But Natalia is our utilities guru. She has a PhD in engineer, so I'm sure she knows a lot about utilities. So that's the team today. The three of us are going to be talking. I'll do the presentation, and then Blake and Donald are going to be leading the discussion with you guys, and I'm going to be taking notes. So today's goals is, like I mentioned before, the part one will be a presentation where we're going to talk over project purpose and objective. We can still give you, what we were going to go ahead and tour and some project samples, and then we'll do the debrief and discussion, which is part three. But mainly is we do have a lot of questions on this presentation for you guys. We don't have to answer all the questions today, but at the end of the project, we should be able to have pretty much every answer, every question that are in this presentation. So the intent today is to start the discussion to obtain guidance from the CRA board on the future direction of downtown Groveland streets design and festival park. And some initial questions over here, just keep that in mind. We're gonna be coming back to this, what character and identity should downtown Groveland streets reflect? So we want to hear that from you guys. What street design features and alignment best supports safety, accessibility, mobility, and downtown activity? How should right-of-way be allocated for travel lanes, pedestrian, bicycles, parking, sitting areas, street lighting, and signage? And how should Festival Park contribute to downtown's revitalization and complement and expanding existing open spaces, programs, and events activities? So these are only 4 questions. You're going to see how many questions we are here. So last time that I was here was on November when we kicked this project. We didn't kick it off. We presented to you to get it approved. So these are some slides from that presentation. So the plan purpose is to develop a comprehensive plan in preparation of the State Road 50 realignment project that DFT is doing, and you guys been preparing for this for a long time, to guide circulation, street design, stormwater, and utility improvements along mainly Broad and Orange Street, but we're also going to be looking at the adjacent streets. And we want to make sure that we also take that opportunity to reimagine Festival Park as a vibrant urban square. And on the map over here is, where the 2 streets are, Broad and Orange, Festival Park, and the rest of the network. So plan objective, the graphic over here that you see is from your CRA plan. So, we all know downtown is part of the CRA, but we want to build on your previous planning work. We don't want to start from zero. You have done a lot of things in downtown and want to build and leverage into that existing vision. We want to make sure that we improve in multimodal circulation and connectivity, reimagine and design Festival Park, enhance the streets aesthetics, plan for stormwater and utility improvements on the streets. I mean, I want to make the distinction that we're scoped to think about stormwater and utilities for the streets and the parks, not necessarily for the entire downtown. And then position the city for future engineer permitting and funding opportunity in terms of the streets and the park, and then collaborate with the city staff and other consultants, the stakeholder, you guys, through the design and planning process. So what are our project tasks? So this is where our task to do. We had an initiation and area inventory, which is pretty much all completed. We kick it off with the staff. We're now kicking it off with you. We got a lot of data and inventory. We did a site visit. During that site visit, we wheel every single streets, and the result of that is when we do that, then we start building your typical sections in SketchUp, and that's what you see over there, and that's gonna help us inform to test some street design that we wanna do. So that's there, and it's a kind of comprehensive. We're also getting all your utility information that you have available. Then we're tasked to do a circulation and streetscape plan where we're gonna have a vision, guiding principle, develop the concepts. We're gonna select our preferred concept. We're also gonna look at the intersection, especially if we're talking about one-way versus two-way. We'll present some treatment options for you guys, and that we're gonna overlay with the signage plan. Then for the festival park, we're gonna do kind of similar way. We're gonna have vision, guiding principles, signage plans, and we're scoped to do 2 alternative options for you guys, which you're gonna talk about that later, and a final plan. Stormwater utility coordination is for the streets, and so we are mapping where all utilities are, so in case that anything needs to be graded, anything needs to be moved because of the design that we produced, and we can talk about that. And stormwater integration is for the parks and the streets as well. Then we also scope to do cost and implementation. We'll do some engineers' estimated probable cost for you, do almost like a phasing plan, see how we can phase the entire project, because nothing can get built out of one. Start brainstorming about funding strategies for you guys, and then getting ready for next step for construction documents. All that we'll do usually hand in hand with engagement, and I'm gonna talk about engagement on the next slide. And of course, what we do is we usually give you guys kind of interim deliverables, so you're not gonna see everything at the end. We're gonna meet, I think, 4 times with you guys and the public. So we'll do a draft plan and a final plan and a presentation of part of this. So this following slide is, our entire process. We're aiming to finish this May to June of next year. So we divided the process in 3 different steps: existing condition, concept plan creation, and final plan approval. So we're pretty much done with the existing conditions. We already kind of documented everything that is here. We're building a base for the entire area in AutoCAD and ADA inventory. So we are here on CRA and staff workshop number 1, where it's initial ideas and virtual tour, let's call it like that. And then we are gonna meet with you guys. Everything that you see here in the dark circle is the times that we're gonna meet with you. We're gonna do this, a similar format that we were planning to do in today's meeting, we're gonna do with the community. So we're gonna have a workshop with the community as well, hopefully sometimes in mid-October. And then we're gonna gather feedback today from you, then with the community members. Then with that feedback, we're gonna propose and have some design alternative for you guys, and then we're gonna present it to you before the end of the year. So we're gonna try to piggyback to another scheduled CRA board meeting that you have either, I believe the last one, it's mid-November or December. Then we'll break for the holidays, and then we'll come back, refine some of those concepts, and see you guys at the beginning of the year, probably mid-February. And then once we get your final feedback, then we'll do our final design and final plans. But we want to make sure that we present those final designs to you first before we have our community meeting number 2 to the public. So that's the other bubble there. And then the final number 1 will be your approval. I just wanted to keep you in mind that, we're scoped to do 2 alternatives for everything, and we can carry the 2 alternatives to the end. The tricky part is when we start doing cost. We're going to be doing cost out of 1 alternative only for both, 1 for the streets and 1 for the park. But the design, you can carry throughout. The intent is we can get consensus of what we all want throughout this process. That's why it's a little more extended, and we got a little more engagement to get to that. I believe we created a story map, which is a virtual page for the project, and it should be up in the city's page. Perfect. And then we also launched a very short survey, which is basically the same questions. If you grab this where it was your tour map, we have a survey on the back, which I would like all of you to fill it up, today. So at the end of the day, we're going to be collecting this. So the same questions that we ask here is going to be available online for people to fill it up, and we start promoting that. And this survey is going to be open until the end of the year. So plenty of time. Any questions? Okay. All right. This was going to be a beautiful site tour, but I got you guys an aerial photo. And then Blake is going to get back to this. But there was a purpose and reason of the streets that we were going to visit, the stops that we were going to do. So we wanted to take you around downtown, and Blake will do that during the discussion part. But the idea was to walk and stop at Lake David and look at that and talk about the programming, existing programs that you have there. Then stop at the corner of Orange and Lake. And it was still going to be really difficult to talk because it's really, really loud and the amount of traffic that you guys have in there. Then walk on Orange. So Orange is a 60-foot right-of-way street going eastbound. So that's how much we have to play with, 60 foot. Then they were going to turn in Indiana, which is one of your perpendicular streets, and then get on Broad. Broad has a different, also it's going one way westbound, but we have 80 foot there. So let's keep that in mind, the space that we have. We have 60 feet on one street, we have 80 feet on the other one. And this is just a right-of-way, it's not building to building. Then we're gonna go north, and we were gonna stop in the park and talk about the park a little bit in there, but also we wanna kind of bring your attention to Crittenden Street, which almost looks like an alley, but it's still a street. You own the right-of-way. There's some parallel streets over there, or piece of land that looks like it's part of the park, but it's privately owned. But we can think about that, a whole area. And then we were gonna attempt to walk down where it says number 8, that we know that segment from like 7 to 8, there's no sidewalk. It's almost like, feels like the driveway of the business. But the intent of the walk is also make you guys a little bit uncomfortable. It wasn't necessary to be a pleasant walk. It's to look at the challenge, and this is the challenge that we want to try to fix. And then there's the train depot over there, and then going down Lake. We're still going to do that in the discussion part, but I think all these points, even though we're not going to go all the way to the ends, I think this core has all the key elements or key spots that we wanted to go over with you guys during the workshop today. So this is our starting point. We're not starting like there's nothing in here. I'm going to go back. Nothing in here. We're taking in consideration that the realignment is going to go. There's South Lake Trail coming in. There's going to be a DOT pond on the east side. There's going to be a park and ride or parking part of the FDO3 trail, and look at the whole entire network. And I'm going the wrong direction. Okay. I'm not going to read all this because I'm going to have Blake read this for you guys. But remember, said at the beginning, we have a lot of questions, and at the end of this process, we should be able to answer and have an answer for each one of these questions. That's why we have it here. So today, how should right-of-way be allocated for travel lanes, pedestrian bicycles, parking, seating areas, street trees, lighting, and signage? So when we're thinking about street design, we need to start thinking about traffic pattern and speed management. It's a bigger component. Intersection and movements is another component. Safety and comfort, bicycle and transit, green infrastructure, on-street parking and curb space, and streetscape treatment. So we want to be able to, today, on the discussion later with you guys, hit on each one of these points. So in a big question, it's like actually the first one in your survey over here is how should users be prioritized for improvement? So we have our buildings, pedestrians, motorists, buses, experienced cyclists, novice cyclists, because by facilities, we can design facilities depending on your age and ability. So on the survey, that first question over here, we want you guys to rank this from 1 to 6. On the other hand, on the park, we are gonna go ahead and we're scoped to do 2 different options, or 2 different alternatives for you on. One, and these are working titles, I'm just gonna say that right in front. So a civic park or civic square, and the other one, if assuming that City Hall is gonna be sitting next to this park, so how can the proposed civic park and future City Hall site work together to get a vibrant civic complex? What event, activities, and community gatherings should be civic park support? And what park elements in future are most important to include in this civic park? So for example, a central lawn, seating areas, water features. And then, if City Hall is not gonna be placed next to this open space, what is still going to be, the type of activities and uses that you want to see in this open space? You already have Lake David, and there's plenty of program and activities you see over there. But if we're having a brand new open space and park on downtown that is not next to necessarily a city hall, then what do you want to do? So those are kind of the 2 conversations that we're going to be running parallel. So we're gonna try to skip this one, but going back to the downtown street, if you look at the survey on the back that you have printed over there, we already said and talk about the street use. There's another one that would like you to start ranking, at the end of this meeting. You don't have to do it now because you might think something right now, but later on you change your mind. From 1 to 10, we want you to rank the improvements that you want to see. So similar for Festival Park, the questions for Festival Park is not that they're divided by civic space or downtown park, it's just general questions about activities and programs and space type at this moment. And then the third one is, I usually like to ask this because I've been hearing a lot of people saying, we have the person from IT looking at the photos and there's like, oh, that looks like a winter garden. And it's like, well, no, it's Maitland, they're similar. So what inspiration plays or other communities you really like that you think that we can take some element from those communities and bring it to Groveland? Thinking about it is not always like a one-on-one comparison, so we want to hear about that too. So we got, this is not the... It's the longer version. It's okay. Let me, go back. Okay, so we got you some images just for inspiration. I presented some of this back in November for you guys, but almost to kickstart the conversation. And then you can tell us, with that question, other places that you want to look at it. So we're gonna go to Ocoee, Maitland, Orlando, and then a place called Wauwatosa in Wisconsin. And I went to the wrong place again. So, okay. On Ogowe, we had kind of similar things with you guys. They wanted to relocate City Hall to a different location. We were able to then design the street, Bluefer Avenue, which is just a regular brick street, 2 ways, parking on both sides. It's under construction right now. Another one that they wanted to improve, they have another street parallel to that when they want to put a bike lane or a trail in the middle of the street. They have enough right away here. It was like 80 or 100, so everything of that will fit. And on the image on the left is what it looked when we started the project. Image on the right is the road in construction, but the image on the top is like how we're going to envision this road to be a residential and mixed-use street. I'm going to skip this one for now because we are only going to be talking today about stormwater in terms of the streets. So there was another presentation. Maitland is the one that we think is a pretty good comparable for you guys. When we started in Maitland, they already have a city hall. They built it, they expanded the fire station, and they want to create this civic space. They have a green lawn next to that. And the whole overall project, it was creating a civic space next to City Hall with a green lawn, with a fountain. And their goal for that is to be able to create festivals, concerts, movies on the park, farmers market. So this was a concept kind of all together. We did both. We did the park and we did the street at the same time, which is a shared street. This is the aerial view of that. And here are some additional images of the park and the civic space. And here's another one that we're setting up for a farmers market. Here's a view of the existing. So when we're talking about who we're going to prioritize, so it's the pedestrian seating areas, there's on-street parking, landscape planting strips, there's some signage. And then for this one, it was pretty good for them to address stormwater, so we have a lot of stormwater planting and low-impact development throughout the site. And here's some images of some of their festivals they do. They have the capacity to put 2 separate stages at the same time, one in the park and one of the streets. And here's some image of their weekend farmers market. Parking district, it was a little bit different. It's a different scale, but the story on parking district is we were dealing with 2 DOT roads, OBT and Princeton, and we make them a complete street. They went from 5-lane roads to 4-lane roads, and one of them needed to accommodate a trail. So this reminds me a lot of the South Lake Trail segment that we may have here, and then how we can make that space livable and be a trail for pedestrians and cyclists. And the village of Wauwatosa, it's a town next to the city of Milwaukee. A little more to the scale of that, it was a whole village, and we were able to redesign every one of the streets. Some of them are 2-way, some of them are 1-way, some of them have shared spaces. Every street in this network has a purpose. Not all street functions the same, and they don't serve the same users, kind of in that way. And then we also were able to make room for a downtown park that did not existed. So these are some inspiration images that we got from Chair Street from Europe. They're pretty common, and now Chair Streets are pretty common here in the States. This is a nighttime shot of the Chair Street with the overhead lights. They also wanted to brick the street. In this case, they selected a lighter color for the brick, but it's all brick from wall to wall. And here's some activities that they usually do. They plan a dinner, or it's not a dinner, yes, all the restaurant put tables. There's a big table in the middle of the street. They shut downtown for that. They have a bicycle race, and they have an art show too every year. And then let me just go back pretty quickly. And talking about, 1-way versus 2-ways, they do have some 1-way streets. They do not treat depart for pedestrians the same way. So one, your sidewalks are pretty narrow, and that's what you see in your right side of the screen. The other one, they wanted a little more room, so sidewalks a little bit wider, but there's enough space to put a kiosk, put seating area, planting, and everything else. But this is one-way street with heading parking. And one, okay. Now I can't, there you go. And then I think this is the last slide. And this is their central green space. It's a very simple space. It's just a green lawn on an oval shape. And the way it is, they have a lot of topo, so it has a sitting wall around, but they use this space a lot, especially to do kind of small concerts like this one. It's been very well utilized by the town. And with that, I think that concludes my part of the presentation.
Morning. My name's Blake Drury, and I'm a planner, urban designer. I talk slow, so this is going to be like a big change, and I'm sorry. But the goal today actually isn't necessarily for y'all to hear me. It's for us to hear you. And that's why we had the tour set up, because y'all have thought about these streets a lot longer than we have so far. And this is our chance to kind of hear from you ideas that you might have, because everybody, walking, driving, riding a bike through downtown is like, man, I wish this was like this thing. And so we want to hear that from you so that, Claudia showed you lots of variations of streets that we have designed over the years. There's a whole bunch that we didn't include, but, there's nothing here that we haven't seen before, but we really need to hear from you all if there are some special things that, maybe we don't see just sort of looking at it from a higher level. So I'm going to go back a couple of slides. That's Tim Maslow jumping up and down and saying, yes, I love this park, when we get done. But it's hard to get in the right frame of mind for this, partially because when the new segment of road is built up to the north, it's going to so fundamentally change the character of traffic downtown that you can't think about things that are maybe happening now and say we need to solve those, because some of those, like truck traffic, for instance, is going to be solved with the new road. So I want you to kind of picture things in that future condition where the bigger, faster traffic is happening not through downtown. And so we talk about things in terms of rebalancing the roadway and the public space. So we're talking about public space from edge of right-of-way to edge of right-of-way, and we've got a chance to rethink that. And because it's your street, you have fewer constraints than if it was someone else's street. So I think that's important. And I want to start with the question, and I'm not going to pick on anybody, but I want to have a discussion because we would be having this discussion out there on the street corner. What are these streets? And when I say these streets, I'm really talking about Orange and Broad, but I don't want to forget about the side streets too, and we'll talk about those maybe separately. But what are these streets doing? Are they supposed to be for, somebody to access through Groveland? Are they supposed to get somebody to a destination in downtown? Are they supposed to be a place that's a great business address? Like what in your picture of Groveland in the future when we get in this situation, like what do you think these streets should be doing? It's always, the first person is always the hardest one to get to talk.
Destination downtown.
We've got one destination. Anybody else
I
feel?
think the street should dictate what we want and not allow cut-throughs from the bypass. I worry about trucks still going down there if we have 4 lanes or 2 lanes. We can say no trucks, but we do that on Villa City Road, and that hasn't worked yet, so we need to make it car-friendly and not semi-friendly.
All good terms. I like that. Anybody else?
Second, Jay Cox, definitely destination, right? We don't want people going through downtown. We want people coming to downtown, so.
Great.
Going slow.
We can work with that. And you said going slow?
Going slow.
We can work with that. We'll talk about that in a second. You look like you were,
Easy access to parking, because no matter what you have, if it's going to be a hassle for me to park, I don't want to come.
there are ways to deal with parking that are still positive to the rest of the surroundings and not make it feel like a parking lot. And I think we can talk about ways to get there.
I think the increased safety for our pedestrians is really important. We have crosswalks right now. I can't say they're user-friendly. So if we want it all to be walkable and you can park on one street and walk through, I think we need to increase the pedestrian safety and slow for sure.
Are there, so I don't forget, are there particular aspects of the crosswalks that are problematic? Like, is it ramps? Is it just the distance that you're exposed?
They're uneven and
Okay.
just kind of feel randomly placed.
Okay.
And since you said ramps, the accessibility side obviously is something that we have to think about a lot.
Right.
Because right now, it's not easy for people to go from sidewalk to street to sidewalk.
Okay. So let's then talk about something somebody had brought up when you said destination, and we want to be able to kind of dictate the terms of how people come through, because this slide, the concept on this slide is about whose terms get to dictate everything else in downtown. And right now, everybody, like pedestrians, cyclists, even the business owners, are existing on the terms of the trucks, basically. So if we have a chance to rethink that, whose terms should sort of drive design? Doesn't mean that if you say the pedestrians need to be the ones that are prioritized, that cars don't exist, but cars can move through on a much slower, safer set of circumstances than if we're prioritizing for cars or buses. So, given this set of choices, and this starts to come into play when we think about some design solutions, because there will be trade-offs. And so if we understand clearly who we're designing for, then we can explain those trade-offs and try to get to the best situation. So of this sort of mix of 6, what do you think is kind of the priority for improvements?
Blake, can I just want to jump in and
Yes, sir.
We need to determine what the citizens want that'll bring them downtown. I mean, for us to be doing traffic patterns and all that, I mean, what's going to make it a destination isn't how the traffic is going. It's what shops do we need, what restaurants do we need. I don't see a lot of that in the survey, because to be a destination, you got to have what people want. And when we look at a Sanford, or we look at a Winter Park, I'm looking at Sanford more because they've evolved it more recently. But it was based on what the citizens wanted, right? And what's going to make somebody get in their car and turn the car on and drive 20 minutes to come downtown? And what are they looking for? And that kind of dictates, and I'll go back to conversations we've had on other occasions. Are we going to have a downtown that at 5 o'clock, like the French Quarter, gets sealed off from traffic because we got the bypass, and then people can go from restaurant to restaurant and go to antique shops or art shops and all that? What is the end thing that's going to give us the point of difference? And that ideation session has to come from the citizens, you know? What's going to make you come down? And we're going to have different answers. I guarantee you Trilogy will have a different answer than Eagle Point or Lexington, because we have different age groups, but we have to really say, this is what we want to be, and then design around that, in my opinion. And we can see other areas that have table crosswalks and stuff that slow down and keep the big trucks out. But I think, in my opinion, first we've got to determine what we want to be, and then we design around it. I think we all think that we need more parking. We all think that we need all this, but just to do that in a vacuum without saying, is there going to be a sports bar? Is it going to be a restaurant? Is it going to be an art shop? Is it going to be an antique shop? What's going to drive people down there, especially with the bike path going through? We really have to determine what that is, in my opinion, and build from that up. And we've talked before about ideation with citizens first, so that they don't think we've hired somebody and then say, what do you think? Because every time I get the reply, well, you're just bringing me something that you already decided on, rather than having ownership in the process. So I would really think that we want to go, Frank, to what we want to be before we go on what we're going to do.
If I can answer or talk to maybe a couple of things that you brought up, because I think they're hugely important. I would love it if part of our task was figuring out what different uses should happen downtown, but our task is to figure out how to design the streets. And while it may seem like those two are like inextricably tied together, they're actually fairly independent, because there are things about great streets that are universal, that don't rely on whether it's a sports bar or a boutique or an office, because you as the owners of the public realm are designing it to be the best possible public realm that you can. And there are some very universal things about kind of widths of sidewalks, for instance, and whether or not you have on-street parking or not, that exist independent of whatever the use is. And that's important, because if you think about the whole life of this city, there are things that change relatively quickly, like the uses of different buildings. There are things that change relatively slower, like the buildings themselves. And then there are things that change very infrequently, which would be the design of things like your streets and parks. And then the things that change like almost never is, where are the streets in the street grid? So thinking about in terms of that, we have a chance to design some streets that will stand the test of time, independent of what sort of uses happen along them. There are things that we need to do to the street to make sure that a great sidewalk business could happen, because I think all the stuff you're talking about are kind of street front businesses. there's some rules that we should follow that, some buildings and streetscapes out there do and some don't. But I think to the extent that that's our task, that's what we need to focus on today, so that as the citizens come, virtually any of those answers could be accommodated by the streets that we're designing.
May I pick up on what the mayor said? I want to make sure that I have an enhanced understanding. You are the subject matter expert, but as I sit here, I'm a little confused, because are you saying build the streets and put the businesses in, and that way they're designed and the businesses have already been established? Can you help me understand? Because I'm not understanding.
Absolutely. Let me see if I know we have, that's a little small.
And is all of this going to be done without constituent input? That's what I really don't understand. You say you were given a task. Shame on the task if it didn't involve the input of the community.
No, they are going to be doing the same thing with the public. That input,
Sorry.
I said they are going to be doing the same thing with the public. So this exact same meeting will be happening with the public.
It's on the timeline.
So-
Right, you're first. So thank you for adding that. You are first. So we want to hear what you have to say. If you can see the screen, and I don't know if I can.
Yeah,
I can't point. So if you can see the screen and you see the dashed lines that indicate the edges of the right-of-way, inside of that, those are private parcels owned by individuals, companies, LLCs, who develop them at their, to meet the market. You have a set of standards about how that development has to happen, but in terms of the public rights of way, those are the responsibility of the city to figure out how to design and how to accommodate the widest range of things that you could possibly imagine within the context of what you want to happen downtown. And so this is a case where we're trying to figure out, because we know the realignment is coming. When that realignment happens, that means there's going to be a very different set of traffic circumstances downtown. It means there's going to be a different set of movement patterns, and what the staff has carried forward is the idea that we need to be able to think about what the design of those streets are so that we're ready when that happens. So
is your task strictly to just design the streets?
Strictly to design the streets and the festival park space. But to the extent that we're talking about streets, yes, to bring forward street designs for the streets that are in the navy blue and gray colors on that map.
Then why are we asking what each of us want? I'm like this, I don't understand.
So, if I may, we could very well just go design streets and hand them to you, based on professional knowledge, based on kind of the guiding documents that you may have out there. That almost always results in failure, because there are circumstances, there are things on the ground that we need to be able to understand and see. And this is the beginning part of a process. So we're trying to find out before we draw anything, is there stuff that we're not seeing that maybe is out there? Are there things that you all, as people who come downtown all the time, notice that we need to know about as we carry forward with our design?
Like, I don't want to monopolize, but I'm going to use this man over here as an example. Can I use you as an example, please? So we have a coffee shop, and it's very hard to get people into a coffee shop if they don't see other people around. If he had cafe seating out front where people could see people coming by, that would attract more people. Those are the kind of things I'm saying that's going to affect the street, right? I mean, how are we going to have cafe seating at the ice cream shop, at his shop? All these different things really impact what the final thing. And if we're going to be an entertainment district or we're just going to be a pass-through district, that's going to dictate what the roads are. Well, there's a lot of questions here because of Festival Park on holiday celebrations and all that, but when it gets down to what's the actual use of downtown, we need to determine that. And there are opportunities with some of the land that we're getting ready to inherit to do swaps to where we could take over more of downtown space and dictate it to what we want to do. And that's where I'm coming from. I'm not, if we gave you a scope document and maybe we were a little not clear on that scope document, but we got to determine what we want to evolve to be. And one time storm drains, one time roads, one time. But what's going to drive energy is how these streets are going to drive the energy to downtown.
Can I counter that? So you had said that there is kind of some, for lack of a better word, like universal truths when it comes to street design.
Yep.
From what I understand about street design, which is very little, but I do try to study up on as much as possible, and walkability is you design those streets to accommodate, and not just the streets, but you're designing the streets alongside the street parking, alongside the sidewalks to accommodate that 15 or 20 feet that would be needed to put in a sidewalk cafe if that was something that the business wanted to do and maintain. So like, from what I understand, those designs are in here, those concepts are in here, and you're gonna design the streets to accommodate those things regardless of whether or not they're there.
Unless someone says, no, that's not where we're headed. But it sounds like, even though you're saying we need to know where we're headed, the implication for the street is exactly what you're talking about. Like the universal thing is from the front of a building to the curb needs to be about 18 feet. That's a universal, very good small town streetscape, right? You end up with, starting at the curb, you end up with 6 feet where you can do a planter. So you get a street tree in there. In between the street trees, you do lighting, you do furniture if you're going to have it, so trash cans, benches, et cetera. That all fits in that first 6 feet behind the curb. The next 6 feet is the walking zone. That's clear, and that allows two people to pass by 2 by 2 without having to like turn sideways and sort of move. If you design the 6 foot of the planting zone so that it, has trees and tree grates and things, the sidewalk, is never less than 6 feet. Sometimes it's more than 6 feet. Then the last 6 from the edge of that walking zone to the front of the building is where you have space for outdoor dining, for seating, for a shop to bring out some display to put in the front. That gets you a 2 by 2 table along there. And that's kind of a universal space that if you can design to it, and sometimes you might have, 16 feet, sometimes you might have 20, but if you can get to that 18 feet, you can do all the things that you want to do that will get the people who want to be here because they want to locate, a cafe, or they want to locate, a stationery shop, I'm just making stuff up, but some wide range of uses, that 18 feet gives you the chance to do all of that. If for instance, somebody said, well, we really need to maximize parking, like having every inch of parking that we possibly can is an important thing for downtown because we don't have any other place to do it except the street. If that starts to push into that 18 feet and it now becomes 10 feet, that's why we're having discussion like this, so that we can understand, well, maybe that's not the solution, or maybe that is, and maybe we can live with the 10 because we think some other thing is going to happen downtown. But from everything I've heard, getting as much as we can to that sweet spot of 18 feet, and we haven't talked about what happens between the curbs yet, but getting to that kind of universal sidewalk should be our goal, unless I've missed some other point. And you don't have that you don't have that everywhere. So we need to figure out how to get to it.
Like, can
Mr.
I
Mayor,
say
if I may,
something pretty quickly? So, sometimes probably the beauty of having the street first before the building, if the goal is really to get 18 feet and you don't have it, because your buildings are too close, to the edge or to the right of way, with redevelopment, we can create guidelines where we can set back that building a little bit to gain additional space for your outdoor seating, for example. So I know it's a little bit of like a chicken and the egg kind of situation where we are, but we have to start somewhere. It sometimes is, do we start with the streets? We start with the buildings. You're gonna do both at the same time. We're here to start with the streets. By the time that probably we end up doing cost estimations and schematic design, there's more new development coming, but there's some basic DNAs that we can start with, and then with infill redevelopment, if there are some situation, example, when we have 60-foot right of way, which is less space, and the other one that we have 80, and we know that we need more, then what can we do when this redevelops to gain more room for your outdoor cafe?
Mr. Mayor, if I can speak to it from a very high level. Great downtowns are like a recipe, right? Great meal has a good recipe behind it. It has core ingredients. If you look at the plan view, a great downtown is also a combination of those things, right? So you see the right-of-way, and you see the parks, and you see the buildings, you see the private lots. These are all ingredients, right? What the city has ownership of is the right-of-way. It has ownership of the parks. Sure, we own maybe a few lots here and there when we're discussing land swaps and different deals with developers, right? Those private properties, though, are ultimately not going to be built by the city necessarily, but they're dictated by our form-based code, our community development code. When we talk zoning, we talk about our town core and town center districts. These are those mixed-use districts that dictate what private developers ultimately build on those, right? What the developers do not have ownership of, they don't have control of, they're not going to fund, is the streets, the infrastructure, the on-street parking, and the park spaces, right? That sets the stage for a great downtown, but it's also the interface of those ingredients together. You can't have one really without the other, right? If you go, Blake, to a view of an actual street, maybe at from a pedestrian scale, a pedestrian view that shows.
Oops, I'm going the wrong way, sorry.
That other one worked. All right, so this is key too. If you took away the building, right, and just had that street, you don't have that sense of of space. If you kept the building and you had a large parking lot there with a street, no on-street parking, no sidewalk cafes, no sidewalks, no street trees, with the same building, you have a much different sense of space. Great downtowns, again, go back to how these ingredients come together to form this recipe. Things that you're going to hear as part of the study, you're going to hear building to street width ratios, right? And it's all about forming a great outdoor space. That's what people typically gravitate toward downtown. And it's not to say uses aren't important, but uses are flexible. They're going to be developed typically by the private uses, but our code is going to help dictate those uses. What you usually want to see on a downtown, at the ground floor at least, is active uses, uses that attract people, right? Because it's not necessarily just signage that attracts people. It's a sense of place, and it's seeing other people. If you're driving or walking down a downtown and you see a lot of people sitting outside, eating at a restaurant, the satellite cafe, you probably don't even look at the sign first. You're just saying, hey, there's a lot of people over here. Something's working over here. I might want to stop by and see what they're serving, right? So it's really how all these things work together. And it's not to say that Noah and Frank won't work with the consultants on surveying through communications and getting feedback in terms of what types of restaurants do people want to see, what types of shops, what types of civic events do people want to see downtown to help bring them there. But if we don't work with the consultants and designers and ultimately construct what's going to happen in those spaces that only the city owns, the private developers will never do that. So we really need to take ownership, right? We've had this form-based code sitting out there for the last 5 or 6 years. The private developers, they're saying, we need the infrastructure. We need the streets. We need the stormwater. Set the stage for us. We are the developer of downtown, the city. We look at other communities like Trilogy or Trinity Lakes or Cypress Bluff. Our code dictates that, but those are ultimately developed by other builders who develop the streets, they develop the stormwater, they develop the parks, then they sell the lots off to private builders, right? In downtown, there's no other developer. We can't call up Hanover. We can't call up KB Homes and say, hey, you got to put this infrastructure in. That's on us as a city. So until we do this, the groundwork will not be achieved for that private investment to come in. So that's how critical, that's how important the work that Blake and Claudia are doing with us. And we're going to walk through what materials do we want on these streets? Do we want two-way? Do we want one-way? How does Broad and Orange work together? How do those local streets work together? What kind of parking needs? What kind of stormwater needs? They're new coming in. We've been here for the last 5, 10 years, some of us. We need to download to them so as they keep working through this timeline and getting community feedback, everything comes together, thinking with the end in mind. When they come back, it truly reflects the vision of what you all want to see here and your constituents want to see.
Yeah, I understand all that, but I don't understand, well, you have to walk me through the form-based, because to do form-based downtown, we have to bulldoze it down. Okay? You don't have a historic, you can't put all the stuff there that you want in the form-based code. What I'm saying is, if we understand if the guest or the public wants a entertainment district, a restaurant district, everything from the curbs to the size of the sidewalks to there's tons of stuff that we need to look at downtown if that's the way we're going to go. What are we going to do with the back sides of all those buildings that face the park? Are we going to do something with that? But I just have never built anything without understanding what the public wanted first. I wouldn't put a restaurant on a corner just because it needs to be there. First, I got to understand what's going to make them turn the key and come. And I don't want to beat that. This is good work. I love the photography and everything. I just want to make sure we've got the scope right and we're starting out right. And Mr. City Manager, I do get a lot of people that say when we go out there with all this and don't have the ideation first, that we're trying to show them something that's already been done. And we've been through that whole ideation and then do this, but ideation comes first, and then there's ownership in it. And I'm not saying anything of this is wrong. I'm just saying maybe we need to look at making sure that, that our public understands what's going on, and understands what do we want downtown. Because I do think if they say we want art shops and restaurants, we want walkability at night and back and forth, it changes the way the streets are designed, the curbs and everything else. I mean, you from Sanford to Claremont, you can tell the difference, right? On the way their downtowns are. So I don't want to take up any more time, but I just wanted to put that in there.
So I think the identity is really important, but currently, as it sits, it doesn't matter what type of identity we decide to go with, it won't work. So I think it comes back to those universal truths where even if we're talking about an entertainment district or a culinary district, honestly, I think the sidewalks and roads dictate that in a way that you're not going to have anything successful if you don't get those sidewalks and streets correct. And the next step is a community meeting, and then we come back together again after that. So I think we need to decide at a high level kind of which direction we think, and then we can adjust that after the community meeting. But yeah, that's just where I'm at.
So, yeah, go ahead. I've got a couple other things to say, but some other folks who haven't had a chance to talk.
Just from listening to the other, I get where everyone's coming from. There are some things that we can't change. Like we have an 80-foot broad, we have a 60 orange, we have certain things that we can't change. There are businesses on either side. That's what we have to work with. So what are the options? The thing I hear about from people is, I don't want to have anxiety going downtown. You don't have anxiety going into other major cities because the roads are okay, you're not being run off the road by a semi-truck.
Right.
So what are the options that we can present to the community on this will reduce anxiety, and these are the options. Now we have to give some type of guardrails of we can't just recreate downtown and let's just do one road between everything. It's like we have the building blocks. Let's see what we can do. What are the options with the two roads that we have?
So let me.
And the back sides. But look at this picture right here, Councilman. You got people crammed up against the wall, and look down the street. You've got cafe seating out into the sidewalk. You've got jets out here with trees on it. Instead of having an ability to go out there in a cafe-style seating, look down the street. How do people get through that?
What's the width of the road?
I
love all of these different options, but some of these cannot be done in Groveland.
Yeah, and
we would have to deconstruct the faces of these businesses that we don't have owners.
And the idea of showing this stuff to you is not that we say this is what we want to do here. The reason for showing this to you is for you to look at it and go, okay, yeah, I like the fact that they've got some space for outdoor dining, but maybe it's not enough. So maybe we need to think about more. Or like in this case, there's no curb between the front of one building and the other side. Like that sidewalk runs right into the street. If you look at that and go, yeah, I think that would totally work on Broad Street at Main, that would be the kind of thing that we would be talking about when we were out there. What I would add to your comment, and Tim kind of uncorked it a little bit as he was describing, what we were doing, is, for one, everyone has said we need to make this a more walkable place. Everyone has said we need to make the vehicular speeds slower, which goes hand in hand with walkability, but they're not, they could be mutually exclusive. So we need to make it slower, we need to make it more walkable, we need to prioritize access to businesses, be it on foot or by having parking. The other thing that parking does is it makes that sidewalk safer because it gives you another 8 feet and 1,500 pounds of metal between the moving car and the person on the sidewalk who's walking or sitting. So those are all things that you know, I've heard you mention so far. One of the most functional ways that you can speed up cars is to have them go one way. And one of the most functional ways you can slow down the road is to have two-way traffic. And so I think one of the things that we have brought up for discussion and want to talk about is, should we be thinking of these as one-way streets still or two-way streets? And, you know, we certainly have a kind of preference for functionally how cities operate. Generally, that two-way streets work better. But if there's something inherent in the one-way operation that y'all are tied to, you know, we could certainly kind of think about how to improve that. Yeah.
This is kind of in line with that and in support of what Chair Keough, I think, said in a different meeting as well. So these back streets, these alleys, or the back of the businesses that face Festival Park or anything like that. So I absolutely believe that, yes, what you're saying is like there's these universal designs that work in just about any city. But there are things that we can do to design these connector streets, the connector roads, the alleys that would facilitate something like a restaurant wanting to go in. Because if you don't have some sort of design for those connector streets or for deliveries, and that's what I said Chair Keough's brought up before, is how do you get the trucks in and out that have to be downtown? Right. And I think, and this is maybe a question for Tim, is like, what it doesn't look like is on your scope is the connector roads. Is that something that, because I'm not going to ask you to go out of scope with something that's going to cost us money unless we decide that's what we want to do, but like, can we include those connector roads in this plan? Because that's going to dictate whether or not we want to go one way or two way.
So, good point, Dan, because downtown, it has to be grid, right? It's a network of streets, it's not just one. Right. It's how they work together in tandem from multiple connections and different roles and responsibilities. So that is baked into the scope.
Yeah, and you called them connector streets, we call them side streets. Okay. And I said at the beginning, we'll come back to the side streets, but the side streets are vitally important because one of the things from a kind of urban perspective that you have going for you is you've got really small blocks, right? Like the speed of the traffic and trucks notwithstanding, like it doesn't take long to walk from one place to another in downtown. It's pretty walkable. A lot of that has to do with the fact that you've got small blocks. The trade-off with small blocks is that you don't have alleys and places to do service, right? So we've worked in Leesburg where you've got blocks kind of a similar size and buildings all up to the edges, and they want to have redevelopment, but there's no place to put a transformer, for instance, because there literally is no back. So you have some cases where, yeah, the blocks are pretty tight. You've got some other places where maybe you have alleys that could be formalized a little bit more. But then you also have the side streets where, you know, if you're thinking about where does service access come from, for instance, it may have to be that it's, you know, delivery on a side street and then wheeled around to the front just because that's the way to get a business, to serve the business rather than serving it from, you know, Broad Street. So that kind of how the time at the curb gets allocated is something we have to think about. Is it all the time parking? Is it, you know, mostly parking, but then there's some service zones? Like that's kind of a detail that we'll have to solve in order to get to a design. Yeah.
We actually have 3 different type of streets. The street that you're going to put up on their Festival Park, that would be more pedestrian and cyclist. And the Broad Street, since it's the widest one, that's where the most parking is going to go. Orange Street is going to be a more walkable street. There are 3 different, completely different types of streets.
Good point.
So you can't, you're not going to make them all the same. They're all 3
Correct.
different.
Correct. And I would even argue that probably block by block, even Broad Street, for instance, might be different block by block, depending on the condition that you have in front of it. So it's in a situation like this, we wouldn't take an approach that says, here's the typical section and we're just going to plow this, all the way down Orange and all the way down Broad. It really is kind of like it's surgery. It's not just, wiping everything out and starting from new. And because you have investments that have been made, for instance, by FDOT that, maybe they're good, maybe they're not for the health of downtown, but they're there and we need to figure out if we need to be working with them or if there's some flexibility. The first thing that comes to mind when any of us look at a street is, can the curbs stay where they are, right? Because the minute you start moving curbs, then you're moving inlets, then you're getting, your cost is going this way. The first thing we look at is, can we live with this kind of curb to curb dimension? And I don't know if we have a thought on that yet. There are some places where it kind of works. There are some places where it would be great to have a narrower street, particularly as we talk about speed, because the wider the street is, the less friction there is, the faster it feels safe to go. And we need to reinforce that slow speed with all the design that we do, which means, making it as tight as we can within the realm of things like radii and other things that you need to operate downtown.
The council, Mr. Mayor, if I may, the councilman brings up a really good point, that not every street could be treated the same, even though it's a network and they have similar rights of way. What I would recommend as an upcoming next step, Blake, is that we do a street legend and we pinpoint, the realignment is going to be its own animal with the state, right? That's going to have a different design speed, different aesthetic. There's certain things that we could do to circumvent that, to still have walkability, like a frontage street that would provide more on-street parking. But you're also going to have, the difference between local street, realignment, alleys. With those local streets, part of the interaction out of this is really, some people call this picking winners and losers, but picking primary streets and secondary streets. In today's modern age, where you want the walkability, you want the on-street, you want that building to front the street, have the sidewalk cafe, have that pedestrian atmosphere. But for that to function, you also need some kind of service delivery, freight, back of house, more parking behind buildings. That is going to be your secondary street where those things happen, right? So I'm just spitballing here, but what I mean by that is, say if Broad was a primary street and your buildings fronted Broad, you had your on-street parking, you had your sidewalk cafes, a wider sidewalk in that area, then all of a sudden Orange in your alley behind that, it's more of a secondary street, because ultimately people will have to, for delivery, for parking in the back, for parking lots, more infrastructure, a little bit less walkability. Orange would become more of a secondary street in that nature. And so the design is somewhat different between primary and secondary. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense to me, but I'm
Yeah, so
more-
how would that work? Like,
group,
looking at the map here, like, I understand what you're saying, because you have, like, the downtown historic district, like, most of those right now are storefronts. But if you make Orange Street a secondary street, wouldn't that would just create the demand that is the space now for deliveries, for on-street parking, for parking lots, all that kind of stuff, versus designing these both Orange and Broad in a more similar way that would say, okay, well, we're trying to expand. We want developers to come in and build buildings aesthetically that kind of match the rest of them, but we want to see, if, let's just say, if the vet were to leave, right? We would want that property to be just as appealing as Broad Street. And that's not really a statement, it's just a question whether or not that's something you guys, inducing demand for another primary street.
If we do that, you just need to figure out, all right, well, what's the other alternative for delivery and back-of-house parking and things of that
Maybe
nature?
I can just kind of add something too. So I just came from Inverness not that many months ago, and we're at the later stage. So what happened was originally we, developed a section, and then now they're moving into and then came something which was shared compactor, right? So now you get rid of the dumpsters, and now you're opening up the back of buildings for what is now the third evolution, which is going to be a city walk, which is actually reverse frontage, taking the back ugly parts of the buildings, making it a city walk. So these can be accomplished in phases. We can't necessarily bite off the streetscaping at one time anyway. So it's like, okay, we put all our chips originally in Broad, and then phase 2 is Orange, and then we start reverse frontage. And now you've got these enclaves, because it really starts with one main area, right? You get that catalyst, and then you start to develop. And as people flock to us from 20 minutes away, now we start to get creative with the alleys, and those become reverse service sidewalk cafes, because the businesses are expanding, they need more tables. So it is kind of an evolution, but we have to start somewhere.
And I love that too, though. There's a town in North Carolina that my wife and I go to once every 2 years, and it's Silva. And
yeah,
they've done the same. Waynesville does the same. You go 2 years later, you go back and you say, wow, these dirty back alleys are now street parking. There's nice trash cans, there's benches, and there's additional businesses behind those businesses that weren't even there.
And I remember Waynesville 20 years ago started with that one strip, and they had the restaurants, and you just start somewhere, and then, but if you can plan, but again, it takes getting cooperation, shared compactor, these are evolutionary steps.
Looking at the map, it's almost, I agree with Broad maybe being the primary down at, this doesn't have a, once you get to the lakefront, so just past Lake Avenue, on Orange almost becomes what should be the primary, because we want those lakefront businesses also. So you can't, we have a lot to take into consideration when looking at everything. So I think it switches right there at Lake.
which is another reason that kind of argues for two-way traffic, because what happens when you have one-way traffic is that you have, and we've all experienced it because we've all missed a turn and then had to go all the way around the block. So it actually increases traffic because it makes you do more out of direction travel. The other thing is it eclipses certain businesses. So, you're on Broad, you only have the view from the east as you're moving through. Versus if you have two-way traffic, you get the view from both sides. So from a business perspective, it's a much better address if you have two-way traffic. The other thing is that as a planning professional, I'm still concerned about here is. Right now, you've got a lot of volume and a little bit of speed. Because you have so much volume, you can't have a huge amount of speed. If you have the realignment and a lot of the volume goes up there, but you keep one-way traffic with less volume, there's going to be more speed. And that's the thing that is most concerning about trying to create a place downtown, is managing the speed of the cars that are going to be moving through here. So you look like you were about to.
I was going to just second that, like, if you come downtown and you're just standing on Broad on a Saturday or Sunday and a truck comes through, they come through at 55 miles an hour. So, absolutely. Like, it's just freeing up that space in one way versus the two-way, like you said, it creates tension, it creates friction. So it makes you want to drive slower because you don't want to clip someone's mirror when you have more parking on the side and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
There's pros and cons to both, and those have to be weighed. There's going to be a difference of opinions on some of these things, and our consultant's role is looking at those pros and cons and just looking at it from a different way. Say if they were one way, what are the pros? Well, you might be able to have more angled parking on both sides, so that might be a pro, right? And that could also help slow traffic rather than having a rush. You might be able to have more stop signs and four-way stops at the intersections to slow. But then also on the flip side, there might be some cons to figure out. So it's going to be a back and forth, and the alternatives are going to have those pros and cons and different things
Let
to
the
weigh in.
public decide. I'm all for your pulling parking.
Mr. Mayor wants to talk. He's been
And
trying
I
to talk
just-
for a while.
And, yeah, I've seen them both, and you know, I'm a big fan of Sonoma and other places that have the squares and stuff that are one way. But I just wanted to come back and just ask the expert right there. Are we not tearing up the whole street to put the, we were talking about curbs and all that. I thought all that was going to be in jeopardy because of the storm drains. We're going to have to tear up a lot of stuff to put the storm drains in, aren't we?
It was on, I think.
On? Yeah, now it's on. Oh, it awoke. TJ Fish, Director of Transportation and Public Works. So, Frank's point is very, very relevant. I absolutely support, and Tim and I have talked about this a lot, make no small plans for this downtown. But the sequencing of buildability is very important, and so is the expense. You're going to have to you're going to have to eat this elephant and bite. So, to your point, an extra $1 million was put into Orange Street to take the 40 feet of pavement and shorten it to a 24-foot crossing across 2 lanes instead of 4 on Orange. That was DOT's safety commitment. It wasn't flower beds, it was safety. Knowing that the city would be taking over Orange with a brand new surface and those pedestrian improvements. So that might not be the first thing the city says we need to tear up. We might live with that for a little bit. Broad, it's in 2 pieces because of the way DOT is handling it. They are offering an agreement to the city from existing State Road 33 intersection to Lake. They're offering, instead of them resurfacing it, give the city money that would have been put into the surface while we figure this out. So that's a win, but that leaves it up to the city to dictate the pedestrian improvements, the on-street cafes, the sidewalk cafes, possibly stormwater. Then it gets different. From Lake to the west end, there's going to be a trail, and they're putting that in existing right-of-way, and Broad is still going to be a very wide street until it's not. So we got to kind of look at this in segments, and I agree with Frank. And then I want you to look at this map. There's something very, very important here at both ends. At the east end, look at that intersection of 33 and 50 and our what will be 2 city streets, Broad and Orange. Look at the west end of that design. DOT designed this years ago around what? Your one-way pairs of Orange and Broad. What you're inheriting when this is done, and those trucks are no longer coming through downtown and they're on the new 50, is you've got signalized intersections at both ends that are one-way configured. So to change that is no small expense, and we need to take that extremely seriously. So I agree. What is the most important elements of the discussion? Probably are the pros and cons of one-way versus two-way on each of these streets. And then how does that inform how much additional right-of-way you will have for the other things?
Are we going to have to tear up Broad Street, the curbs, the street? When we do all
It
that?
looks that
So
way.
what I'm saying is the curb and the cost of the curb that came up is of no relevance because we're going to tear them up anyway, because we've got to put the storm drains in, right? So this is the one chance to go back and design it exactly the way it needs to be for the future. And we don't have to worry about, and
Dig one strategy.
and also, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm a one-way guy, you know that. I'm just a one-way guy. And pulling in parking on one-way gives you the chance to make it two-way until you get the other one done. But still, we don't have to take into consideration curb expense and all that because we're annihilating that whole road there and redoing it. Is that not correct?
Well, and to your point, the stormwater, we don't have to touch the street unless you want to touch the street. The stormwater all by itself, you're inheriting a system that's been in place for years, not perfect, antiquated, but not failing either. The issue is as soon as you want to go in and change the lane configuration, the sidewalk configuration, once you get in there, you're probably affecting a stormwater requirement, and you'll have to modernize your stormwater system at that point.
I would say there's probably 3 streets where you're going to have a significant dig. One is Broad. The other is the north side of Lake Avenue, so essentially continuing what we have out here up there once the realignment converts. And then Crittenton is still the most questionable to me in terms of what you do. If you're going to have a really nice urban square, park space up there, probably some mixed-use buildings framing it, various uses. Right now, Crittenton is really back of house to Broad, and it's gnarly, let's be honest, right? And if you're going to have a really nice experience up there in the Festival Park area, that needs to be addressed somehow, and that's, to me, it's a big question.
And also, Tim, back to 1 or 2, to make it harder for the rush hour people to go through downtown and cut through this subdivision back here to get to 33 is something that we need to look at. I agree with there's plenty of places, the French Quarter, everywhere else, where they've got times to deliver and pick up and all that, so they're out of there. But this is a major issue too, and if we have a stoplight down there, we're still going to have people backed up, either on 2 lanes or 1, and I just would hate to not address this issue. It's a dangerous issue with kids back here.
I want to bring up a little history about DOT and this project, and I want to remind everybody, it's technically under construction. The contract's been issued. You've got C.W. Roberts is the contractor. You're going to see activity. So the study was done in 2011, and that study led to the trail. Well, actually, the trail was going to follow 50. And the city of Groveland came back after the study, and it was already in design, and asked to put it through the downtown. And that's how it ended up along Crittenden and along Broad. I say that because when they did that design update 3 years ago, it had been more than a decade since the study. They started talking to me as staff about 6-laning, that the traffic projections were going to need 6 lanes. And we said we have no desire for a 6-lane. We'll figure out how to make the 4-lane work. I say that because cut-through traffic is a serious concern that everyone that's looked at this issue knows that if we don't do something to create friction and slow it down and create a disincentive, you're going to have significant traffic, especially people that are from South Lake will know, I don't want to go sit with the trucks at the red lights. I'm going to cut through downtown. So this has been a major topic of how do we create that friction so that it's human-friendly.
I don't know if we're continuing discussion or what's next, but I would honestly have comms take this and then edit it, add in what folks want, whether it's a 2-way or a 1-way, and then I would email it out well before the October meeting, so then everybody is at least informed and we have a few hundred responses on what do people want before we go into the meeting in October, where we may only have 10 or 15 residents show up.
So that that mirrors the online survey that we've got set up and ready to go. So
I would add some more just from the discussion of the questions that have come up that I would add to it before we send it out, and then try to get some responses, because we can have an in-person meeting. We just may only have 15 folks that show up, and we could send out a survey that gets 300 or 400 responses.
That's a certain demographic that, I mean, your huddles, this is the kind of thing you got to take to the public. I would suggest that we have one for business owners, just small business owners downtown. They're asking what's going on and all that.
We're prepping for that. yes.
And I wouldn't mind seeing a small huddle with your connections, like the young lady that did downtown Sanford, your Winter Park, where they did replace that whole
The
Winter
best
Park
practices, yeah.
downtown. Maitland did a good job, but have them they've already been through it, right?
Yeah.
And if we have to buy them lunch or whatever, if you could get those people together and say what worked and what didn't, it would really, and I know that's your job, I know, but sometimes they'll say something different to you because you're one of them. Then
I think that's an excellent idea. Yeah.
But I would recommend we break this up and get a lot more input. But
Fantastic. I like that.
yeah, we always so everyone understands, we always err on the side of more input, because eventually we're going to hear it anyway, and we'd rather hear it at the beginning when we can understand it and kind of process it into the design. Not to say that just because somebody comes and stands up and says, I think we need to have bike lanes on every street, that we're going to go, okay, bike lanes on every street, we're going to go design that. Because frankly, with the other things you've been talking about, a bike lane really doesn't fit on Broad or on Orange. So hence, all the way back to the beginning, when we're trying to understand who we should prioritize, heard it loudly and clearly that it's pedestrians, it's access for businesses, and then the others kind of fall pretty far behind that. So with the time we still have, I want to give Donald a chance to talk about the park and maybe take the hot seat for a second. But I appreciate all the comments, and if you have a question, just let me know. But thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Donald Wishart. I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture with GAI Consultants, and I'll be working closely with Blake and with Claudia. Once we do settle on kind of the direction and the program and the vision for the streets, I'll be working kind of helping think about the aesthetics and the placemaking as far as streets go. And I will largely be responsible for the park, the Festival Park. So as Claudia mentioned, and you'll see on this slide, and I know we're going to run short on time, and I want to get to your comments, but a couple points I just wanted to make quickly is that, we wanted to design a park for the next 50 years. So much like Blake said, don't think about Festival Park today. Think about, assuming we re-envision the streets and your downtown becomes much more active and vital and your population grows, how do you envision that park moving forward? What are some of the program elements and activities, number one, that you don't have today that you envision maybe you needing as you continue to grow in the future? And that does start to cause us to think about why we have these two concepts. We have two concepts for one primary reason. One's going to be City Hall, and one will be without City Hall. And I think, as we've kind of talked about it internally, traditionally, when you think about City Hall in a small town square, there is a certain amount of formality that goes with that. It doesn't have to be that way, but traditionally that's the way that it is. It's a more passive space. There's seating. You may have a fountain in the center of a square. You have cross pathways. You may have large oak trees. It's a quieter, more contemplative space as kind of an extension of the formality of City Hall. I think Maitland City Square is a great example of how we kind of straddle the line between the formality that comes with the city square and how we want to flex towards some other uses in that space. We had a very similar conversation with the city of Maitland when we had just exactly these kind of meetings where they had a new city hall, they had no civic space. The street that you were looking at on the screen is Independence Lane. That runs right in front of City Hall, and it fronts right in front of Independence Park that you see here on the upper left. And if we can go to that slide with the aerial, because I think it's really helpful. They wanted to have the formality of a city square, and they had the image in their mind of what that was. And we kind of talked to them about, what are the range of uses? With Independence Lane coming in, it gives you the flexibility to think of that space. And you have a very similar scenario with Festival Park. Whether you have a city hall there or not, there's some streets that bound that park that can come into play as we think about the vision. And that's exactly what we did here with Maitland Square, where they wanted some of the formality that comes with the city square. They wanted to be able to have space for outdoor movie night. They wanted to have water to kind of fill that space with activity and kind of have that cooling effect. They wanted some outdoor space for flexible seating. And then we used the street as kind of the space where more of the active, flexible uses would go, so that we could allow that park space to have some flexibility. So when you think about the flyer that you got from Claudia that has the list on the back of the program and the activities, think about it in the context of City Hall, no City Hall, but I don't think it's mutually exclusive, because the way I think about it is there's a spectrum of program and uses that we could have across both of those park types, from the most passive and quiet spaces to the most active and kind of everything in between. And there's really no wrong answer there. I think once we understand from you of, how, whether you have a city hall or not, how you envision that park being used over time, and think about how you want to kind of either have new program there or maybe shift program where you don't have space downtown now and then maybe just have new activities altogether. How do we accommodate all that? So it's function and form and how that's going to kind of help drive the program. And I think Maitland City Square has a lot of the comparables I think that you have, because as we look at that park today, I mean, you have a huge head start just with the aesthetics of the park today, with a canopy, the established the tree canopy they have there that actually helps us, get pretty advanced in terms of how we arrange spaces, how comfortable it's going to be initially, without us having to wait, 25 or 30 years before that canopy establishes. And that's very similar to what we did at Maitland City Square, where it kind of drove how we arranged program on the site. So that'll be something that we think about as we get into a little bit more site-specific design. So as you think about these two park typologies, formal civic square with City Hall, maybe an active, more flexible, functional park space, we'd like to get some input today on what program do you see happening that accommodates uses today, then actually lets the park grow and accommodate the uses in the future. And maybe you could use the back of that card as kind of a cue for some of the things that you'd like to see happen in the park space. Is there any received ideas about what that park space should be?
When you were thinking about the park, did you look at the park across the street we have right now?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that covers a lot of it, and you got two parks
mm-hmm.
in a relatively close distance to each other, so they have to be completely different. They can't really be the same venue for the same kind of stuff. They got to be completely different.
Well, it's true. You wouldn't want to, the way that you function today with the program that happens here, as you grow, you may outgrow that space. You may think of a program that's complementary to what's happening there. Well, that's why I'm saying it's part of our role to help you think about, what would the park program need to be today and how it might evolve over the future. And, I think it's, part of us kind of taking a broader look at the other open spaces and parks that you have downtown, the existing program and where you've made investments. But that you may outgrow those spaces and you may outgrow that program as you continue to develop your downtown. So you can think about, how do we need to accommodate the near-term uses and how program might shift over in park spaces as you grow.
I would say too, Jay Cox's point, that's actually the first thought that crossed my mind now. Obviously, we want it to be a place that you can run markets, that you can run events, but when you look at downtown, like downtown is where density needs to exist. Density creates that vitality, creates economic opportunity, but people still need a place to breathe. So when you go and you say, okay, you've got a market going on, or you've got the pro wake tour going on, wakeboard tours going on, people will still probably want a space that they can go to that's separate from that. So I would agree. I think they shouldn't be doing the same thing. I think, at least from what I understand of markets, which is limited, most vendors want to be on concrete. It's a lot more easy to set up. So I think Lake David long-term, I mean, you can go pretty far down Lake Avenue to keep that going for the market. But what you don't have there is you don't have tree cover. You don't have a comfortable place to enjoy, you know, the city of natural charm. If we want to be that, we need a place that feels a little less manufactured and a little bit more of a natural feel. And I think Festival Park already has that. And if you throw in gardens, it could be, you could have a nice walking garden with native planting, all that kind of stuff. But I think the best serving the community isn't another space or another venue. It's a place to enjoy Groveland for what Groveland is. And that's just my opinion on that. Though I do have two questions about just the design, both north and south. Well, the first question is that land, the strip between the businesses and Festival Park, that is a property that can be developed, correct?
Correct.
So you could have, for better or worse, something else put there that has to be considered, how do we design in Crittenden, because that street, it could be a small 2-story townhouse that could exist there. And then the other side is, you have the other side of Festival Park, which is literally right up against the bypass around 50, the intention is that we would, if we were to design Festival Park as a place of contemplation, of quietness, is that even possible?
Yeah.
Or would we have to build a wall? Would we have to build some sort of natural buffer? That's all I got.
Like a berm, yeah, I think you're right on target. And I'd use another town, Lake Mary, that has 10 parks within its city limits. And you talk to the mayor, who is an instructor down. Remember, we talked to him. He was a UCF instructor. They made the money on the taxes, because everybody that was around that park, their property values went so much higher that it paid for the park. That's how they got 10, and they're debt-free, right? So I agree with look at Winter Park. I mean, Park Avenue looks out on the park. You put a berm area on the other side, it gives you that different feel and attracts people to come to that area, you know, and that's what we've got to do. I think the city hall is a whole different debate we don't have to get into today.
If I could add a couple things, just random thoughts. So usually not over-designing the parks, and I know not all landscape architects like to hear that, but when I think of a great downtown park, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of use. And sometimes when you over-design something, it really pigeonholes you to a certain use that only makes sense. So I would just recommend that the group looks at something flexible where you could, maybe on a Wednesday morning, have quiet contemplation, or a random pop-up yoga, studio on the lawn could happen. But then you could also have an event. You could also potentially have a farmer's market. And usually when you design something like that, it doesn't, bring the cost through the roof, which is also a concern here. We're trying to keep things affordable. We have a tight budget. So that would be one of my recommendations, is something somewhat formal but flexible and not too expensive. I'm going to throw out one other crazy idea that I've probably shared with some of you in passing, is I think there's potential to explore, if the group wants to look at it. A lot of great downtowns, especially with a trail corridor like we're about to see, has a really great system of a park block system, so to speak. So when you think of Lake David, and then you see Festival Park, you see that dotted red line, that's the trail corridor that's going to be coming through. I've always thought, what a unique experience would it be? We're already working with Avalon and turning that to an urban plaza around the train depot. It would be great if we could somehow connect, not necessarily taking the whole block, but at least partial block, and wrapping that trail with a system of a small park space that would connect all ultimately down where, if you replace where City Hall is on South Lake Avenue next to Lake David, something would potentially have to happen with the Mexican restaurant, but have a series of green network that connects Lake David all the way to Festival Park. And maybe there's a stormwater feature as part of that. You have the trail, you have something that kind of beautifies the area, but then you give that needed stormwater infrastructure that the downtown really needs. Just a thought.
Tim, just to build on yours, if you take our park study that we paid a fortune for, and we did the survey, the top 5 things that the public wanted was open space, a place to have a picnic. There was no organized stuff until you get down to about 15. They just want a place to go and relax, and that's what our citizens told us already.
It's not over-designing necessarily, right?
And I think you're going back to your points. I think you're spot on. I'm kind of a minimalist by philosophy, so I tend to agree with you. And I think it's the light touch is going to serve you well into the future, especially as if you do want the park to evolve and grow into other program uses. You haven't kind of backed yourself into a corner with kind of packing it with program, and it will also help you with cost. And, it will be a tough condition here because of the uses around the park. You're going to, all the noise and activity that Blake talked about with the traffic is just going to shift to the north. So it will be something that we need to grapple with on that northern edge. And I think your point about the trail is a good one. We talked about that on our first trip out there with the opportunity of maybe having something linear along those blocks that becomes a great connector. And then when you get to the park, how do we integrate that edge so that it kind of works with the uses and the design aesthetics of that park? So I think those are all great points. But I think, one of the fundamental drivers, I think, in my mind, is you think about the city hall being on that space. If you think about traditional city hall spaces that may have a fountain or some sort of statue or focal point in the middle, would that feel right if you took that out and put a tot lot in there? So that, that probably wouldn't feel right, and it wouldn't be the right use. It probably would be, contradictory to some of the other spaces around that. So that's, when we talk about, what's appropriate for the context, that does become a driver, and that's kind of what led us to these 2 concepts. And I don't want to get too caught up in the semantics of urban square versus park. I mean, it's going to be a great downtown park, no matter what we call it, but I think you would be served well by kind of err on the side of simplicity. Anything else? Anything else from the park survey that you want to bring forward to the thoughts about this park?
I have a question for Blake.
Blake, we're back to streets.
It's easy.
Yes, ma'am.
How long would it take to complete, what is the timeline, like 3 years, 6 years, would it take to complete a project like this?
To complete, you mean construction?
Yes.
Any one of those streets is probably a 9 to 12 month long construction timeline. So when you phase it, because, I guess if you wanted to, you could redo everything at once, but you're not going to because you couldn't live through it. It's probably at best 6 to 10 years to phase each one of these. And kind of to TJ's point, you're starting at a different starting position with each one of these. So, Orange in the segment east of Lake, like that asphalt's new. You probably don't want to start there. So that might be a later on project. You may start and then, see a lot of redevelopment on Broad Street and think, maybe we just focus on Broad and do that first. So if I had to guess, I would say that's a reasonable amount of time, but there's a million things that can make that go longer or shorter.
I was just looking for a guesstimate. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Blake, are we, on your slide there, is that a mistake or is there something happening? Because Orange Street points to Broad and Broad Street points to Orange.
Yeah, you have to look at the smaller, the big blue labels are backwards. Mm-hmm. So it's the small.
On the left side, yep.
Yeah.
I think they're labeled wrong on the traffic, the two-way one. and
Yeah,
the one-way- Yeah, okay. As long as we all know.
Blake has reached his limit on questions, so we're going to shift back to parks. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. It sounds like we have a pretty straightforward direction on the park. We will go back to the park survey and make sure we understand all the detail in that. But I do think you have a tremendous amount of potential with the space, City Hall or no City Hall. I think it's going to be a great addition to your downtown, especially given the amount of open space that you do have. You know, is what you do realize over time is the more and more you urbanize, the more precious the open space becomes.
Okay, I'm going to put in something with that statement. Everybody north of Cherry Lake Road has to come down one street, and that's called 19. They all have access through several other roads to get out to 27. If you're going to ask more people that are going to be here in the next 5 or 6 years with all the development out there to all get on 19 and come down to City Hall to pay their light bill, I think we have to start looking at our citizen experience first, because that is a disaster right now. And we keep putting more stuff out that puts more people and more people on 19, and it's the only one that comes in. You can go down to Villa City Road would be the next one. We'd have to widen that, but just when you're looking at the traffic patterns, because that's your expertise, we're very, very different than anywhere else. We got one way to get across the river, and Trilogy all the way through to Trinity to all of these developments have to come down one way. You know, and that's the problem with, I think, putting a city hall there versus something like a community center, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to add to what the mayor's thoughts are, I don't anticipate a yes or no or go, no-go decision made as part of this study on the city hall location. Right. But I do think that block is really key. Community center has been talked about, highest and best use in terms of private development's also been talked about. One thing we haven't talked about yet is on-street parking is going to be a big ingredient really throughout this network, but parking garage, structured parking, potential locations, I think would be good to provide some detail. When I think of that, I do think of that future Avalon area, potentially near Lake David. But then something along State Road 50, like this block having structured parking, then it becomes a lot easier for the driver, the actual experience coming into the downtown. The closer your structured parking is to a major arterial like that, it just ends up being more convenient, and then you get less traffic in the actual street. So that's something to think about.
No, those are great points. And I think, on both of our concepts, even though, the urban design of the space around that is not specifically a part of this scope, we will take that into consideration, thinking about how those spaces might evolve, just like the point you were making with the streets, thinking about how those spaces might evolve into the future, and then how do we serve that well with both the park space and the perimeter streets.
And take a look at, just to put a plug in, Winter Park, where they got Booyah Restaurant and all those restaurants right together, Booyah, Glass Knife, and all that on Fairbanks, where they put the parking garage, they split it and put it right behind all these areas, and they put the beauty shop and everything, but it's hidden, but it's right behind. And again, we've got some space downtown here that maybe you want to hide something like that right downtown.
Y'all may not have a question for me. I do have a question for you that I just thought of as we were talking about this. How does Crittenden Street and that block sort of between Crittenden and Broad, from Lake all the way over to past where the park is. I know right now that's sort of the big cut through, if you're trying to avoid going on the one-way pair to get through. But what's the relationship of that street to those buildings? Like, how is that service for the buildings? Is it access to parking? Like, how does that work right now?
It ends up being quite a bit of parking for those because people know it's easier to park on those back strips. But that's kind of a for now thing though, because that property is owned by a different owner. And again, that's something that might be developed in the end. But that's just my perspective. Somebody else might have a different perspective on that.
So it's kind of acting like an alley-ish
Yeah.
when it's not a cut through? Okay.
You're talking about like right behind.
There's
the
an
building.
alley, and then there's Crittenden, right? There's an alley that goes down behind, and then there's Crittenden as well. And we know
Right,
the
and-
owner to that, he's a really good guy,
Yeah.
and a
We'll want to
really
do
good
something
guy.
with it eventually.
But to have that overlook the park from the back, that's why I say we got to do something with the back side, because that's the view, that's where you would go to, again, it's another Park Avenue kind of thing. You'd want to look out on that and do something different.
Definitely. That's a huge.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as well because it's pretty narrow. Like for development, it's pretty skinny, and so like just thinking about what that might be, to Donald's point about the edges of the park, that having that be as an unknown maybe affects a little bit how you think about the park, but if we think it's going to be developed.
Isn't that just going to be a bike path now, right? It's not a traffic, and you look at what that did to Claremont. You're going to have, if you have restaurants or anything along there, you're going to have bike stands, and they're going to stop like they do at CBC and all those other ones. They're going to stop there. You want that to just remain because you don't want people cutting through there again, right?
Well, won't the people from the park and ride, like there's going to be traffic going between, because at least on here, you can see that there's access from Crittenden to the park and ride and then through into the bypass into 50.
I thought the park and ride came off that doesn't come off the interchange, the bypass, right?
That's something to really think about as a group. So, so where you see Crittenden Street on the map here, your label, do you see how that there's not a street similar to just west of it where that gray street goes up between Broad to where that park and ride is?
Yeah, Illinois
could be-
doesn't extend.
Yeah,
is
so
what
that's
you're
something to
saying.
think about if we focus more on alley, and then all of a sudden, the buildings that would be on the north side of the Crittenden alley could potentially just be oriented to the trail in park space rather than having a duplicative street up there. And then ultimately, that development would have a little bit more space too. And then it's really just predominantly for, trail-oriented development. And then if you had that additional connection to the east, then that park and ride would be able to access, say, either the realignment or down to Broad rather than trying to, go west along Crittenden.
So one of the possibilities, I would say, might include that, because that would probably make a little more development sense for that site. It also might create a fairly unique address that, definitely doesn't exist anywhere else in Groveland, and there's only a couple others that I can think of in the region. So that might be worthwhile, but again, other possibilities could happen too that we can draw out.
Probably only for the block that fronts on the park, I would imagine there though, because you get all kinds of access issues and just visibility for businesses to have eyes on the street, and usually that
I
becomes
think of
a
the Savannah
challenge.
Squares is a great example, and Usually they're fronted by development at least on 3 sides to, again, to bring that outdoor enclosure, that sense of an outdoor room for the pedestrian or bicyclist. You're not going to front it, obviously, along the realignment. But if you're driving down the realignment and you look over and you see this beautiful formal park, it's framed by really nice active uses on at least 3 sides. I mean, yeah, it ends up being a very attractive place to want to stop and have that destination.
And maybe pulling out that segment, I worry still a little bit about people cutting through and filtering through the network, because as they come south, they're still everybody's trying to make their way east, and they may, kind of filter through there. That may actually head off some of that cut-through traffic.
I guess like a timeline question. So if we were to decide in the next, I don't know, year or 2 on what we're going to do with Festival Park, being that it's kind of a minimalist project, I imagine it's not something that would be too far out as far as completion. But when you look at City Hall, regardless of where that goes, City Hall is a, $30, $40 million project, right? That might be something we don't, and there's so many unknowns with the new tax laws and all that, that might not be something we can afford for another 15 years. So when you think of Festival Park being a place of, visually, aesthetically pleasing, I think maybe some sort of iterative concept for that plot that the aquaponics is on right now to just decide, okay, well, if we have this beautiful park, but we got nothing else going on, an unmaintained area, there might be something else in there as a landscape architect. You could give a recommendation and say, hey, here's something you can do on this space. It's not going to cost us a crazy amount of money, but can be there for the next 10 years, because I just don't see us, regardless of when we decide on where we're putting this City Hall, that's a long way away.
Yeah. And you're probably 2 years, 2 years away from implementing a park plan as well. The design permitting is, close to a year, and then you're at least another year, even for the simple park plan for construction.
And Tim, can we maybe get some clarity on what you say people will drive by and see the park. On the other hand, that's all the noise from the trucks and everything that's going to come across that park to the thing. So do we need a berm in some other way so that I just hate to have all that truck noise coming. It'll defeat the very purpose of that park, I think.
Here's something to consider with the team is either a berm and landscaping solution for safety and noise. The other is if we're really concerned about parking and walkability, a frontage road with more landscaping and street trees to add some kind of on-street parking to frame between the realignment and the park space. That could be a second option to look at.
Mm-hmm. And if you take TPC and some of these other ones that use the berms as a stadium seating, if you're going to do something like for concerts or something like that, the berm could be functional, right, as well as
a backdrop.
Yeah.
No, that's right. Those are good points. And there are creative things that we can do with park structures. So if we're going to have a trellis or some sort of performance stage element to kind of turn your back to it a little bit and use that as a backdrop and then buffer it so that, it's still a focal point of the park, but we're kind of creating an edge there that's going to do our best to mitigate the sound and just seeing the trucks move through that corridor.
Those two side streets, Maine and Indiana, is that FDOT's intention is to put access from the bypass into those two streets, or is that optional for us?
Yeah, that's part of the plan. We would just be responsible for those as two new city local streets that we would have to improve.
So either
those
way,
are good connections.
Sure, but we would, aesthetically, that has to be considered between those two. There's no continuation between Festival Park and where the proposed City Hall location would be. There has to be a street in between those two.
You would want one.
Okay. Yeah. That's why I was asking, they have that access, that's something that will have to be there. And like I said, it's good that it's there, but there's no continuation. There has to be some sort of break.
There's a couple things there. It's common for members of the public to talk about closing streets down in a downtown, and they might mean well for certain characteristics, but anytime you close a street down, ultimately you lose a different connection, which ends up putting more traffic and more pinch points on the other rest of the network. And the other is, in a downtown, you want as much on-street parking as possible, right? And then as soon as you have a street with on-street parking, ultimately that frontage on that private block, that's going to be highly desirable from the private development community because they're going to want that infrastructure. When you eliminate those streets, you're basically eliminating connections, on-street parking, and potential developable property, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, and I think,
we're keeping those connections and refining those along the park space if possible.
right. But maybe there's the instance where we close that street for, a concert or a festival or a market, but not closing it permanently, right? Because I
Temporary, right?
tend to agree with you. Mhm. Anything else?
Do we want to wrap up? Is it lunchtime yet? We still have more conversation.
You want to talk a little bit about the community meeting that's coming up? I think it's October 7th on your timeline. And
Well, I don't think, we said mid-October. I don't think we have,
7 is just in order, 6, 7, 8, 9.
yes, and it's a
Okay.
month.
The day hasn't been determined.
gotcha, mid-October, gotcha.
Yes, it is mid-October. So initially it was envisioned kind of a similar format that we have today. We were going to have a short presentation at the beginning. We are going to go and do a walking audit with them and then come back. We'll have less word and more images. I don't think in the first one, and this is the reason that we did not include it in the survey, I don't think we want to talk about one-way versus two-way just at the beginning. We want to hear them to prioritize the user. We want to say pedestrian, bicycle, safety, slow traffic, and then once they tell us what they want, we know what a one-way street can do for you guys and two-way street. So based off of that input, then we'll go back and say, okay, we hear you. This is a one-way street network can do for you. These are your pros and cons, and this is a two-way. We don't want to do it on day one because we want to hear from them. So we also are going to have a little bit of that conversation Blake had, our space for pedestrian. How much do we need? How much right away? And we technically do this as a kiddo part. So that will be a workshop, almost like a workshop. We can pick the day that you think is best for you. We're open for the weekends. If you think more people are going to come, we can do it on an evening. We can pack that up, and I like the idea of the mayor saying, let's meet with the business. So it's almost like, we call it a meeting on the box. You can probably repeat a smaller version of that with some of the merchants. But that is the intent, to have that somewhere in mid-October. This survey, I want to kind of wrap this up because I think when the mayor, you were saying it's like a destination, maybe we can just swap these questions a little more, and maybe we can start asking the people about first the inspiration place, because it's an open-ended question, and we notice that when we do open-ended questions, then people are going to get the juice flowing. We're going to ask them for that place. Let's say they say downtown Sanford. Let's say they say Winter Garden. And then the next question is like, okay, tell us what you like about that place. And that will give us a hint instead of asking us to just mark food district, entertainment districts, and then we can go back to those places and say, this is how many people say Sanford, this is how many people say Winter Garden, and we can take the elements of those places and source that out. Now, I still would like to stay in track on the scope. I know we were talking about public realm and private lots. I would still like to stay on us figuring out what we're going to do with the public realm, between a right-of-way, with the park, with the system. We do have, enough knowledge and experience that we can have an idea how your downtown is going to develop without doing a downtown plan. Because what we are not doing is a downtown plan. We could, but we're not. So, but we can have all those presentations, and at the end, we have 60-foot of right-of-way, we have 80-foot of right-of-way. We'll give you different alternative. We don't envision every street to be the same. It's not. I work in Wauwatosa, and I'm the one who wheel and measure every one of those streets over there. All are different. None of those streets are the same. They all serve a very different purpose. And I think you have a grand variety of streets over here that can achieve a lot. And then if anything else, development will come if we need a little more space, and we can work with planning and adapt that. But I want to stay in track on public realm, because I also get from staff and from you that consultants get a little bit in scope creep, and I don't want to be that consultant, but then I also got to remind you about those things, and we can do both. It's going to take us 6 to 10 years. I think that's enough time. We only do schematic design. We're not going to go to CDs and construction documents. So those schematic design and those initial ideas can eventually, once you, let's say, do a downtown plan, they can change and then can adapt. We're going to be pretty close, but we're not going to be far off for 40%. Any questions for me? Blake and Donald can take a break. This is why we bring 3 people. Okay.
How are you guys advertising the, now obviously through the city, I'm sure you will, but is GAI doing any other campaigns, online campaigns to push the public meeting, or?
No, we're not scope. We produce flyers and give them to the staff to advertise. Older places, so I hear that 10 people are going to come to our public meeting if we schedule that. Is that true?
If you have it at Lake Ridge Winery, you'll have 200 people there.
Well, that was going to be, I saw that on Facebook. I saw that on Facebook. It's that's very creative.
We can't be here. They're not going to come downtown.
Yeah, so is there any events set mid-October in the park? Do you guys have that? I mean, in other places, what we do, we can piggyback at existing events.
Up here pretty soon.
We have the Latin Festival.
Yeah.
And that's 29% of our population, so that would be a great place to get some
And
info.
I can speak in Spanish with us, ¿eh?
Could we,
Muy bien, me
Or
gusta.
you could do it at Trunk or Treat.
so Frank could have a tent set up and get some good feedback?
So Donald and I just finished a park concept design for the city of Newberry, which is next to Gainesville. And what did? We piggybacked out of the Spring Festival, and they also did a 250 anniversary, and we just had a tent. It's not as formal as this format. We don't have to walk, but we got tons of input, and we did almost like a game board with a plan. So I can be as creative if you want me to be. Yes, the best advice is to piggyback a community meeting with an event on an attractive venue with food. Yes, you can get a more ROI.
It'd be cool if you could do one in each district, where we could pick the thing, because the demographics between District 2 and Trilogy, and I mean, can you get Trilogy, their big guy, to let them do something there with come on. Because they got some great people out there that know this kind of stuff too, and would ask great questions, but they're going to want a whole different thing than Eagle Point.
But they're all going to come to downtown, isn't it, at the end? They all have to come here.
Well, at
And
the
look
end,
at the site here.
at the end, in the restaurant business, you say they got to get in their car after they've gone home and start it up, to come down in the evening or plan on the way
Got it.
home. So there's got to be some reason for them to do that, you know, and that's what I would hope we get out of these things as well.
I would agree there's kind of two ways. You want, obviously, survey, and I don't need to explain this to you guys know how to survey, but like we survey online. You get very specific types of responses, a lot of times a little bit more negative or critical. You survey in person, it's totally different. You survey just the people who already come downtown, well, they're already coming downtown, so they already see certain value of things, but you might be missing the thing that you don't know what you don't know. I would say I think it would be helpful to get feedback from other people that we want to make downtown attractive to that currently don't come here. But if I were just from my own perspective, I think it would be extremely helpful to flyer all the businesses to promote this feedback session, because you already have a demographic that already supports downtown businesses. They're already here. They're moving here. They're looking for it. They're already downtown. And they're already walking downtown too, which is kind of crazy and surprising sometimes. You see how many people actually do currently come here. So you want to honor that. You want to make sure we're getting that feedback. But I do agree with Chair Keogh that we don't know what we don't know. And if the people who don't currently come downtown, we might miss out on that, what we're trying to attract them to.
It gives them ownership too.
Yeah.
They'll follow it once they get involved and, yeah.
As a FYI, I don't know how up-to-date it is, but the city, has a small business directory that's online. But again, I don't know how up-to-date it is.
Jeremy is actually working on that right now.
Who?
From IT. So he's already putting, Jeremiah, thank you, Jeremiah.
Oh, Jeremiah.
Yeah, Jeremy. Sorry, Jeremiah, I know you're probably over here. He is working on that right now, getting all that update. In fact, there's a more interactive thing that they're putting together too. So, but it is very helpful because then you can work the directory and get the feedback that way.
A price tag, a relative price tag is good. Before we can say 6 or 10, it might be 30. I mean, we need to know.
Yeah.
This is really expensive stuff, you know, and so we can say phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and some kind of logical.
Phasing and sequencing need to really be the conclusion, I would say. You're going to have the menu, although the various components with rough, cost estimates, and sequencing not only just for a matter of cost, but benefit too. And maybe some strategic planning committee involvement might be able to help with that, give some recommendations to the council. We also have the CRA task force. I'm always bringing up to Frank that we put that group together with various appointments made from this board, just another group to get input from.
Yeah, I think it's kind of somewhere in October at the same time. So let me see if I hear you guys well. So for that community meeting, do you guys want one in downtown and one that is not in downtown? Is that what I'm getting?
At the least, I think maybe a little bit more, but of course it's got to be in the budget, obviously.
I mean, downtown works for me.
Yeah, that's your region. Well, let me put it another way. Can we, if you can't do 4, could we in some way do a video that we could use in our district meeting? And I even wrote down here, what a nice thing it would be. We just spent $24,000 each on 2 drones, right? Couldn't you take those so we could have that film and you could do the voiceover on this and that? So instead of us where we can't all walk, we could see it and you could do the voiceover and you could put the thing in there. But I mean, we need practice on those expensive drones. So maybe we could.
So if we do the workshop, I can offer the drone as part of our fee. The voiceover, it's, I guess we can add it later or with the staff. We did shoot some drone photos for you guys and drone videos of downtown today. They will be on the story map for you to see it.
You could probably edit this because it's on camera. We're on feed, right? You could probably edit some of the stuff you already did right here and put it together. Yeah. And what a concept, because then we could tell everybody, if you can't make it to the meeting, take a look at this and let us know and make it really usable. And then when somebody says, I didn't have a chance, you go, whoa, we have it here, we have it here. It'd be great. Give us some,
And
I like the idea of,
go ahead, sorry.
also including this in all of the upcoming neighborhood huddles as you do go out to the various districts. I think it could be something that it could attract people to attend, but then again, make sure that we're using that time, as efficiently as possible.
I would bet if we combine this with the new Avalon Point 2.0,
Yeah.
it would drive a lot of interest with people,
Yeah.
and you could do just the huddles just on that,
Yeah. When you
And-
think that you're having the realignment about to start, informing people about that, informing them about the Avalon 2.0, and then also the downtown infrastructure, I mean, if you're a resident, it's hard to say that the city isn't taking downtown and reinvestment importantly.
Yeah, and they'll be more attracted because we're not going to be talking,
Yeah.
about politics. It'll be something that impacts them directly.
We'll get with David and Frank and kind of corral all these ideas into a really concerted communications effort.
And if we need a spot in North Lake, we've never used it before, but we can ask Living Message Church with Pastor Brian. That's up on 27. That would probably be perfect for folks that live in Trilogy, but it's not gated, so anybody can come.
Public access is key. Yeah.
Another question that I'm going to say in the survey, for the digital version, we'll add a few demographic questions on this. So like, are you a resident? Are you a business owner? Are you, a visitor? And then how long have you been, we'll ask 3 demographic questions before this. I'm not adding this in here. So then we can source that out and say, oh, this is what the resident says, this is what the business owner says. So we'll add a little bit, 3 or more in here. We really don't want to make it super long, so they don't take more than 5 minutes, 6 minutes to do it, and keep it into a multiple choice or ranking.
And if I could make a statement, a little contrary to Chair Keough here. Because this is the public realm, whether it be for City Hall or for Avalon 1.0 or 2.0, I would think that should be left out, to be honest, because that has, based on our whole discussion today, that is separate from creating the public realm. These are deals that none of them are set in stone. We don't even know if they'll happen. But it's not something that is tied directly to the streets, because that's a slippery slope. There's a lot of different projects, a lot of different concepts that we would need to include in that to give people the full picture on development plans or proposed development plans. If you give all of it or you give none of it, and if you give all of it, that's a lot of content to cover. It might add a little bit more complexity than the public is really wanting to get into in that moment. But that's just my
We can debate that,
stance.
but the 2.0 has to be done by December. So, I mean, it's.
But this is a plan for the next 50 years.
I know. It has
So
to integrate.
I'm not looking to rush
Well, I mean,
those.
that'll be a vote. We
Yeah.
can discuss that, yeah.
Yeah, and for the public, we're going to meet within one more time, but then we also going to meet with you guys 3 more times. And it's my understanding that even the public can participate to these meetings, but they can't speak, right? To the CRA workshops?
Yes, any workshop the public can attend, they just don't really address the board.
So maybe we can also think about, the time and the day that we have these meetings to allow them, some of them to attend and listen. Okay? Frank, Tim, any other?
Nothing else. We'll have a public meeting, CRA workshop, meeting at 6:30 this evening as well, which is publicly attended.
I think there's coffee there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you all.
2 other things for to add on in front of you. There's there's the qualifying for the upcoming gala, the awards. If you can please read that and distribute it so that we can get that distributed. And then the second thing with CRA is the train station. It's ours, dedicated to us now. What's the steps and how fast? There's a real reason we want to make sure we get that started.
Well, the deed split is not complete yet, so it isn't ours. There's been a pause. Once the negotiation started with 2.0, there was no moving forward, that process stopped. As far as the deed split, the surveying, basically, Ross just stopped that.
So we need to get back with Ross.
We need to
'cause
call Avalon, yeah.
And now the property is bigger, So I'm glad that maybe we didn't do that because they're donating more land for that. But the quicker we can get that wrapped up, the better it is.
I'll help Frank. We'll give Beat and Ross a call and still move forward with that lot split, yeah.
Okay.
And this might be probably out of line question for right now, it really could just be for tonight, but since you brought it up, for the lot split indeed, did we vote for that to happen, or did we vote just to say it could happen?
No, you voted for us to proceed with that, and we started to, but then the developer became reluctant to proceed until there were more clarity about what was going to happen with the ultimate, other than that quarter of an acre. In other words, that was part of the discussion. So at that point, we just hit a wall, basically. We had to stop with the deed split, or we didn't have to. The developer's representative chose to stop that process pending this next evolution, potentially. See what I mean?
Yeah, it was logical because they wanted to donate enough for the whole parking and all that around there, so.
Rather than do
We
it
could have done a
twice.
D-split and go right back and do some more surveying. So
Yeah.
my point is, let's get the surveying done and find out what the obstacles are and get that closed very quickly so we can get that situation.
Is that, whether it be 1.0 or 2.0, the lot split indeed, is that separate from either one of those contractual
Want to be
agreements?
included in both. So as we're talking
So
about this
it'll-
2.0 concept, we're still adding that as one of the ingredients to
So
the
that
plan.
quarter acre as promised, whatever, lack of a better word, that is moving forward one way or another and can be done in expediency.
They're
That's my
deeding that,
understanding,
they're
yeah.
deeding that property to us as soon as I mean, it has no bearing on the rest of the stuff. It was an act of goodwill. We want to give you this right now, and we're going to expand it to this and.
Then
get
I
it
agree,
done.
we got to do it quick.
So we
Yeah.
need to get it under wraps, no matter how this other deal goes.
I mean, we voted for it, so.
We'll make the
Twice.
goal, Frank, of contacting Avalon today before your meeting tonight and providing a status update with next steps and milestones, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Any other comment? We go around for board comments?
Yes, sir. Staff comment whenever you're willing.
You want to go before? Okay, go.
Thank you, sir. So, Mayor, members of the CRA, Chris and I have been collaborating. We didn't have ample opportunity to formally request to be on this agenda or tonight. Being very respectful of Frank, as a budget presentation, Tim in his role, we are attempting to solve this State Road 50 utility relocation issue. That we have a substantial number in front of the city of approximately $5 million. We were not given ample opportunity to pursue special funding as I would normally want to do. So it leaves us having to make a city decision with your blessing on how we're going to approach at least the cash flow aspect, that we have to open up task orders with at least 2 construction contractors to start this work in September. So from a cash flow standpoint, we're looking at options, and therefore we are compelled to have to at least bring to your consideration the CRA as a possibility. So I'll turn it over to Chris on a couple of thoughts he had about cash flow.
So it was similarly, a greeting, by the way, City Council, honorable City Council members. In discussion last week, this is kind of a preemptive thing that needs immediate attention. So I actually spoke with Frank as well to make sure that he actually was behind it. From a liquidity standpoint, we can actually do it. I wanted to be conscious of providing additional financing, which was actually underway for this FDOT project. So I wanted to see if there could be a $2.5 million grant that can be paid back by the by the enterprise fund in payments to kind of help float the project itself that's imminent. The remaining balance we can likely fund through both general fund and perhaps utility funding vehicles and try to avoid financing altogether. But if we can't have any assistance with the CRA, I think we may have to explore some level of financing for the project. So I at least wanted to put it on the in the atmosphere, if you will, for consideration this evening, or at least use this forum to at least give some feedback and allow you guys to kind of speak with us as well about it. So that's why we decided to show up and wanted to, use this forum to bring that to your attention.
Chris, TJ, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would recommend we add this as an agenda item and then prepare a slideshow that really depicts to the group what utility improvements have to be made, and look at the map that, maybe as a point of reference that we just looked at. What streets, what sections do these utility improvements have to be made? What types of improvements are there? What's the typical cost? What's the typical timeline that we need? And that might help us determine some additional financing sources. Might be even worth, depending on the timing, talking with Chris, our lobbyist, to see what opportunities we could explore through the state. Correct me if I'm wrong, these improvements wouldn't be needed unless it was for the realignment State Road 50 project, right?
Correct. And it's relocating city infrastructure in state right-of-way. The onus is on the city, to be very clear to the point.
And I think this is also consistent with Frank's initiatives. If you want to speak on our discussion, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, in the CRA right now, yes, we have a large pot of money, but we are actually only in execution of one project, which is the South Lake Avenue, which will be wrapped up the end of this year. So we do have that flexibility from a budget standpoint. Obviously, it's the board's decision, but this would not impact CRA projects because we are in planning mode. That's the boil down, essentially.
Thank you, Frank.
I think the presentation would help, and I would also include GAI. You have the team here right now. The more that they know about what various utility improvements in the downtown area that we're making, typically a lot of these downtown streetscape improvements that we're talking about, park improvements, they're typically paired with utility improvements. So it's part of a dig once strategy instead of digging multiple times. And then sometimes you could use some utility dollars and other utility grants to source, because you ultimately have to repair things after you dig it up, right? So the more we could do things one time, the better for us.
Can I ask a question, and this is probably not a very smart question, but should we not rethink how we're going to redo the train station with right-of-way money that we got, a little over $1 million, put that on the CRA, that $500,000 on the CRA, use that 1-point-something million that we got to buy the right-of-way, because that's not CRA money, that's general fund money, and use that to offset some of this expense and then drive that down to what we really need. But it would seem more logical if we sold that property and now we got to dig it up, that we use the money they gave us there. And I think we can justify a lot more using CRA money for the train station than we can a right-of-way that's maybe not be directly impactful to the CRA.
Yeah, I would see that as a great idea and good part of the equation.
TJ, did you say that has to start in September?
Yes.
And today is August 24th?
4th, yes.
I'm just checking.
So if I have a sense of urgency in my voice, it's because I'm nervous. And
Yeah. Okay, I was just making sure I got that timeline right.
Yes, and as Tim's suggestion, we can come back to you. My concern is you're likely to approve a CRA budget tonight, and if your staff doesn't tell you about this as an option, you're making a decision without all the information. So we wanted you to be aware. The work does, in fact, and bear in mind, it's 2 contractors. It's the 4-lane alignment with trail through downtown, and it's the other 2 miles of trail from 2nd Avenue to Silver Eagle Road. All of that's under construction at once. And when we talk about relocations and dig once and incorporating GAI and this effort, the work's already been done in terms of we've identified 90 utility conflicts with water and sewer lines. Some of them literally requiring the city to move an entire sewer force main or a water main to a different location. Not cheap. And the issue is, if the city is not prepared and we create a delay on the DOT contractor, the legal recourse is to financially make the city responsible, and my job is to keep that from happening. So Chris's involvement coming in new as our CFO is he had to get up to speed of what are we dealing with and what are our options. And the option would normally be your utilities fund, but it's an operations expense. A little bit of this can come out of impact fees, and we'll do that part with impact fees. But the rest of it, we're literally suggesting borrow from yourself, City of Groveland, borrow from your CRA fund, use that line of credit that was originally intended for utility cash flow. Look at all the options, and that's the only reason I'm in front of you with Chris is We're saying the CRA is at least an option to either outright fund a portion or at least cash flow to borrow from so the enterprise fund can pay back. So for the budget to be approved and not tell you that today would be remissive on my part, and so I've done my part.
And don't get us wrong, we did not put that in the budget. We really wanted to bring that up as a talking point for consideration, just so we're clear. That was not put in the budget.
Sure, there'll be plenty of discussion. Once more, though, that's a symptom. How can we have an expense like this brought to us and the due date's 2 weeks away? I mean, this is not the first time, and we need to find out where the flaw is in the system, because we cannot make these kind of decisions in 2 weeks with this kind of money.
I agree.
So when I hear a comment of that nature, I respect it, but I think everybody in this room, if you don't know, let me be real clear. It was going to be 2032, and we wanted to get DOT to move this project up. Well, they did. And your staff's been in reaction mode ever since that announcement happened of what are the conflicts, how many, how much does it cost? And staff's been on the record since February about this need. So I just want to say that in fairness to everybody in the room.
Just to correct you, that dedication and groundbreaking of that bypass was done 2 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
2 years.
We've had
Correct.
2 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're on the same page.
And then we still need a thorough understanding of what the improvements are.
So what
the
do we
various
need to
costs
do
are.
now? Is this for the budget meeting this afternoon, or are you looking for some direction right now from this board? Tell me what you're asking for.
What I was asking for, similarly what he ended in the beginning, would be 2.5 million, and perhaps we can float it in partial payments to where the total grant would be maybe 1, and we pay back the 1.5 in the enterprise fund. That would be a suggestion. Write it down.
I would
sir.
say this, Chris, let's talk more offline this afternoon together. We have the CRA meeting tonight, but then we also have the budget workshop tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to the group, we'll come back to the council with more details. And some ideas.
Something in writing, something that we can.
Okay, I'll put together a brief
We need
plan,
something
right?
more
Not a
concrete.
problem.
If something's not on the agenda, it can't be voted on, right?
We've missed our window for tonight.
Okay.
The information and discussion. Thanks for bringing it up.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
Hey, Blake.